Well, Lee, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting just a few minutes. There was something which had to be done before your evidence began. But now you're here. You'd like to be known as Lee, I gather?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Well, Mary will ask you to take the oath.
Okay, thank you.
Please state your full name
Lee Terence Stay.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely,
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Lee, you were born with severe haemophilia A.
That's correct.
And it was diagnosed when you were a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And your understanding is you were treated at St George's Hospital in London and then at the Ashford Hospital in the early 70s with cryoprecipitate.
That's right, yeah.
Now, in 1975, I think you transferred to the Hammersmith Hospital.
Yeah, I did.
And you were under the care there of Dr. Mibashan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you first received factor concentrates.
Yes.
Shamit, could we please have WITN 1541003? If we go to the next page, these are some records you've exhibited from the Hammersmith Hospital for 1975, and you're about 7 years old at this point, I think.
Yeah.
And we can see if top left-hand corner. Just zoom in on the handwriting there, please. There's a reference there, received, I think that's what the abbreviation is, 28th of August 76, from Dr. Krask. Did you know anything about any participation in any research or studies or investigations involving Dr. Krask?
Not at all, no.
And it's only many years later you've learnt that Dr. Krask was at the Public Health Laboratory Service.
That's right, yeah.
And then if we go back to the page, and we just see the whole page, we can see, top of the page refers to haemophil records, and then we can see your name, various dates. We don't need to look at the precise dates, but you're being given haemophil on various occasions at the Hammersmith Hospital in 1975.
Yeah.
And if we go to the next page, we can see top of the page, these are equivalent records, but for cryobuline.
Mm-hmm.
So you're given a second type of commercial concentrate in 75, age 7 or thereabouts,
Yeah.
at the Hammersmith Hospital.
Yeah.
And I think if we go over the page, this is an extract from the Hammersmith's annual returns for 1975. And if we go to the bottom of the page, we can see reference to you there. There's reference to a clinical response to factor 8, and then a reference to virology records not found. That's in relation to jaundice or hepatitis B. Do you know anything about what those virology records were?
No idea.
Now, we can take that down, thank you. You moved on to receiving home treatment in 1976.
Yes.
So that was administered by your parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my father.
And your understanding is you received haemophil, cryobuline and Lister products, and then from March 1978, factor 8.
Yeah.
And we can probably pick that up most easily from WITN 1541004, please. If we go to the second page to start with, we can see this is an extract of your records from the National Haemophilia Database maintained by UKHCDO.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go to page 4, it's in reverse chronological order, so let's pick it up at the bottom of the page. We've got the reference 1970 to you receiving cryo at St George's. And then we can see for 1975 and 76, when you're under the care of the Hammersmith Hospital, there are 4 entries which refer to Dr. Krask's research work. Did you know anything about that until you saw these records?
Not at all. I had no idea.
And is this right? You still don't know what that's a reference to?
No, nobody can seem to tell me, why they're like that.
And we can see on the right-hand side, this, under the heading of Dr. Krask's research work, appears to show you receiving haemophil and cryobilin in the course of those years.
Yeah, I mean, that would match the other records you just showed.
And so, Lee, can you speak just slightly closer into the microphone?
Yep, sure.
Thank you. And then if we go up the page, we can then see the next few entries for the Hammersmith Hospital. So this is in the late 70s. We can see you in getting the Lister product, BPL product, Factor 8, and also Factor 8, the Armour product.
Yeah.
We can take that down because we'll look at what you got at Treloar's from some other records. Just before we come to Treloar's, as far as you're aware, were your parents given any information by the Hammersmith Hospital about any risks associated with the use of factor concentrates?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Now, you went to Treloar's starting in September 1980. How did that come about?
I went to a normal infant and junior school, but when it came to deciding what secondary school to go to, the local education authority, as I understand it, refused to allow me to go to a comprehensive school, as they were known then. And it was them that suggested that I went to Treloar, so that's how the process came about.
And do you know what the education authority's concern was? Was it that you would miss too much school?
No, it wasn't that, because I didn't actually miss that much schooling, during that infant and junior period. I think it was more the risks to me being hurt, because I was never allowed out to play and things like that. I always had to stay in the library when I was in juniors and so on. But I think it was more the risk of me being hurt and having bleeds and that caused by people hitting me or just running into me and things like that.
Now, you spent the first 3 years or so in the lower school. Before I ask you anything about the details of your treatment for your haemophilia there, what was your impression of Treloar's when you arrived and during those first years at the lower school?
Well, it seemed very big at the time because, I'd never been to a boarding school before. It seemed very good. The impression I got was that, it's a very good place to be. And obviously with the facilities for treating haemophiliacs on site, I felt that it was going to be a big advantage to me.
And you described that when you were at the lower school, you'd be taken by van to the haemophilia centre in the upper school for treatment.
Yeah, that's right.
And again, you've talked about there being regular clinics there. What can you recall about how and when you would turn up at the haemophilia centre in the upper school?
Well, obviously, when you got a bleed, you would go to the sick bay at the lower school, and then they would radio for a van to take me to the upper school for treatment. Initially, the treatment area was like one long corridor, and then you had like a consulting room, I believe, on one side. Then you had the treatment room on the other. After 1981, they built an extension to that, and the area was much bigger, and they had a laboratory and other things like that on site. But yeah, generally, as I say, after your initial bleed, you'd then be reviewed potentially mornings and evenings, just for review of the joints and if you needed any further treatment and so on, and that would go on until the bleed had obviously recovered. And
you've mentioned in your statement that there'd often be a lot of blood tests.
Yeah.
Were you ever told what those blood tests were for?
Very, very rare. The only ones that I recall distinctly were the so-called pre- and post-blood tests that we used to have. So you used to have a blood test before having a dose of Factor 8, and then about 20 minutes later they'd give you another blood test to see how that has obviously affected raised the Factor 8 levels in the blood.
And then you moved to the upper school.
Yeah.
And then your treatment effectively was on site because the haemophilia centre was located in the upper school.
That's right, yeah.
And did the treatment arrangements work in pretty much the same way?
Yeah, there was still the morning and evening clinics. It just obviously meant that you just walk over there rather than having to get transport.
Now, you were taught to self-administer factor concentrates at Treloar's.
Mm-hmm.
How would you go about that when you had a bleed and you were going to self-administer? Can you just talk us through the process and how you'd get the product and how you'd make it up and know which product to use?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you see the doctor who would obviously do the initial evaluation, and he would then prescribe a percentage dose on a sheet, and then you take that sheet down to the treatment room, and then if I was self-administering, then I'd need to calculate how much factor VIII I need to give myself, and that was done by means of a graph. So along the bottom of the graph, you had your weight, and then there was kind of lines going up showing what the percent for each percentage. So if it was a 10% dose, 20% dose, 30% dose, and then you'd read across, and that would give you how many units you should have to give that particular percentage. And then you would try and get treatment that would be as close as possible to that number of units that you read off.
And where would you actually get the bottles of concentrate from? Was there a fridge, or did someone give them to you?
I think most of the time, I think somebody gave it to you. I seem to recall, I think I may have actually got it from the fridge myself occasionally. That might have been right at the end of the period I was there, but the methodology was to get to as close to that particular number of units as possible, and that may involve using more than one batch, because you might have, if you needed like 1,200 units, you might have 2 of 500 units and 1 of 200 units. So although they didn't mix product, they did mix batches.
So for a single treatment, you wouldn't have, say, factor VIII and cryobuline mixed together, but you might have, if you were having treatment with factor VIII on that occasion, more than one batch of factor VIII to make it up to the right number of units.
Yes.
Were you told anything at Treloar's about any risks associated with the use of factor concentrates?
No.
And as far as you're aware, were your parents ever told by Treloar's of any such risks?
No, that I'm aware of.
As far as you know, to what extent was there any interaction between Treloar's and your parents?
As far as I can tell, very little. Basically, my parents just relied on what I told them. They were never given a record of what bleeds I had, what treatments I had, what blood tests I had. As my knowledge, they had nothing.
I think there's one little medical report we've seen with another witness, and we'll look at a sample in your records, and that's all you can recall.
That was the only thing, yeah.
And then, just on the theme of parental involvement, there's a couple of documents I want to ask you to look at. So if we look first of all at TREL 40-267_053, please, Shomik. This is something called a pupil review sheet, medical, and it's one of a number of them in your records, and I think we've seen a very similar document in relation to another witness. We can see it's identifies disability haemophilia, number of visits since last review as outpatient. Someone's recorded many for treatment, the staff member presumably. And then if we go down the page, we just see the question there, parental involvement in medical care, yes. Now that's obviously right in the sense that when you were at home, your parents were very closely involved with your medical care, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
But when you were at Treloar's, did they have any involvement?
No, none at all.
And we can just note the date on this is the 23rd of November 1983. If we then look at TREL 40-267_054, please. Now this is a form, and again there are a number of copies of or versions of this form, different dates in your Treloar's records, Lee. But it looks like your parents were expected to provide information to the school. And we'll just have a look at this. Lord Mayor Treloar College, to all parents, this form must be completed and returned to sick bay on the first day of next term. And then we can see it doesn't appear to be specific to haemophilia pupils. So has your son had any illness during the holiday? If so, please give details. Has he or she been in contact with any infectious illness? If so, please contact sick bay before returning to school. Has he/she attended an outpatient appointment at any hospital in the holiday? If yes, please give date, consultant's name, hospital address and reason for visit. And we can see some details filled in there of you going to the Hammersmith during that particular holiday. And then has he or she been seen by a doctor, dentist or optician? Have there been any alterations in his or her drugs or treatment during the holidays? Are there any other points you'd like to add about his or her medical care? And your father or mother has written bleed into left thigh. Do you recall these forms?
I do remember them. Yeah, I think they were sent out during the holidays for them to be then completed and brought back at the beginning of each term. I'm not sure whether it happened every time, but I certainly do remember a number of them being filled in and taken back. We took them back when we went back to school.
So there's information going from your parents to Treloar's in relation to what's happened in the holidays, but as far as you're aware, no information going from Treloar's to your parents.
Correct.
Can we go back then to WITN 1541004 and look again at page 4. This is the National Haemophilia Database extract. And we can see various references there to Hampshire Comprehensive Care Centre. That is, in fact, referring to Treloar's, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if we just look at, by way of example, we can see you getting there, if we look from the top of the page down, even though it's in reverse date order, we can see you getting Lister product, BPL product, and Factor 8 commercial product in 1982.
Yeah.
In 1981, at Hampshire, you're recorded there as getting Haemophil, Factor 8, Interhem, Cryobulin, and again Factor 8. And similarly, in 1980, you're recorded as getting Interhem and Haemophil.
Yeah.
And then if we look at TREL 40253_022, please, Shomik. These are some records from Treloar's which show your treatment. And if we see the first date is the 12th of October 1980. So is that within a few weeks of you starting at Treloar's?
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
And then if we look back down the page and we look in the left-hand column just over halfway down the page, we have the entry units material, and we can see that you're there getting Haemophil.
Yeah.
So pretty much straight away, your first treatment or one of your first treatments there is with Haemophil.
Yeah.
If we go over the page, we can see again in the same section of the form that you're treated with Haemophil.
Yeah.
If we go to the next page, this is November of 1980, so again, still your first term. It's not quite such clear writing, but I think that's the Interhem that's being referred to there. If we go to page 5, we've got a clearer entry there for you being treated with Interhem. If we go over to page 6, again we can see treatment with Interhem.
Yeah.
If we go to page 7, again this is still all within your first term, we can see treatment with Haemophil. Go to page 8, treatment with Interhem. And then page 9, we're now into your second term, January 81, treatment with Interhem. If we go to page 11, and we don't have records, I think, of every treatment in this format. So we're now in late 82. We can see you've got the Lister product recorded there, so the LHS project BPL. And if we go over the page, we can see Lister again in December 82. If we go to page 13, we can see Lister in January 83. And then if we go to page 15, we can see this is January 83. You're being treated with Cryobulin.
Yeah.
And then if we go over the page, this is February 83, treated with Factor 8. So a range of different commercial concentrates and also, from time to time, the NHS concentrate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was there ever any discussion with you about the implications of different concentrates, or whether one was posed a greater risk than others, or anything of that nature?
No, nothing at all. I'm not sure what they used for their selection criteria, whether it was just what they had at the time, or whether there was any other reason for giving particular product types. I don't know, but there was certainly no discussion about the effectiveness or not.
And then if we look at WITN 1541009, please, Shomek. We go to the second page. So we can see a form here. We've seen very similar forms, or identical forms, I think, for other witnesses. Please complete and return to Dr. Arenstam, Lord Mayor, Treloar Hospital, Alton, Hampshire. Is that your dad's name?
It is, yeah.
Agreed to lease day, taking part in a trial as explained by Dr. Arenstam, and signed, it would seem, by your father. Do you know anything about what that trial was?
No, not at all.
And like the other examples of this form we've seen for other pupils, it's undated.
Yeah.
Were you ever aware of participating in a trial being organised by Dr. Arenstam?
No, not that I can recall.
And then if we go, please, to TREL 40267_023, please. This is an extract from your Treloar's records. We can see that the second entry is headed Autumn Term Assessment. And if we go over the page, top of the next page, we see reference to a Spring Term Assessment. And that's a pattern we see repeated. Can you recall anything about what appear to be these termly assessments?
Yeah, I mean, they often did a full range. They used to do a full range of blood tests, and then they also used to do a full orthopaedic assessment. So they would measure, joints, how much movement you got in your joints, and it's just a full body analysis of where your joints and muscles are having problems. But yeah, it was that blood test that they were pretty much done at the beginning of every term, I'd say.
And then if we go to the third page, please, we can see the second entry down refers to prophylaxis, 20% alternate days, and that appears to be in relation to your right elbow, identified there as a target joint until the end of the half term. Mm-hmm. And then if we look at the next entry, it's the very bottom of the page. Again, we can see reference there to prophylaxis. What can you recall about getting treatment on a prophylactic basis?
It was given when I had a number of bleeds very close together in the same, usually joint. So if I'd had, say 3 bleeds in 2 weeks into, say, a left ankle, then to break the cycle of keep repeating the bleeds, they would give you regular treatment on alternate days for a number of weeks to try and settle it down, so that they broke the cycle of keep repeating bleeding over and over again.
And was anything ever said to you about what that might mean in terms of possible risks of viral transmission, because you might be receiving more by way of concentrate that would otherwise be the case?
No.
Can we then go, please, to TREL 40267_028, please, Shomek. We start off by going to the third page. And if we look at the bottom half of the page, we've got an example of something here called a medical report. This is for the 19th of June, 83. It refers to the above average number of bleeds mainly into the right elbow. There's a reference to 3 courses of prophylaxis, attending physiotherapy, doing some remedial gym sessions, and having had a good term. Do you know what this document was?
I believe it was part of an end-of-year school report where they would have separate pages for each subject. So they'd have English, maths, science, and so on. And then at the end, you would have you would have this medical report to appear, and sometimes there was a separate physiotherapy report as well, and they were generally sent home to parents.
And did you physically take them home to your parents, do you know, or were they sent by post? I don't know.
I can't recall. I think we took them, but I can't recall 100%.
And if we look at the top of the page, I think we've got an example of a physiotherapy report. Again, so we've got summer 83. Lee continues to have regular physio treatment for his right elbow, which remains a few degrees short of full extension. He also attends remedial gym sessions and works well. So is this your understanding? This was the kind of medical information sent from time to time, possibly on an annual basis, possibly termly, to your parents?
Yeah, that I believe was all they tended to get. You know, it's very, a very loose summary of what had happened, but nothing in detail.
And then if we go to the next page, we'll see what else was going on in terms of entries in your medical records in June of 83. So if we can see, top of the page says the 29th of June 83, summer term assessment, I think that says. There's the various entries, bleeds, haematology, looks like biochemistry and so on. There's a reference to prophylaxis. And then we can see circled the word AIDS on 6th of March 83. Before we look at what's written underneath, Lee, I haven't been able to locate, and I think neither of your legal representatives, anything in your records which shows anything in particular for the 6th of March 83. Do you know what that reference to that date means?
I've no idea. I don't know why it's there, because it's a June entry. Why would they suddenly mention that date, that earlier date, 3.5 months earlier, all of a sudden at that point? But I don't know.
Is it actually the 6th? Might it be the 10th?
It's possibly the 10th.
Have you checked the 10th?
Well, we have. It's not easy to read the handwriting. If we just go back to page 1, just so that we're looking at the full set of records, we've got an entry there for the 15th of December 82. If we go to the next page, there's an entry at the top which looks like the 15th of March. That's the next entry. And it follows the format of bleeds, haematology, biochemistry, appliances, I think is the next one.
Yes.
Prophylaxis and physiotherapy, but there's nothing there that seems to match up with the entry in June. So if we go back to page 4 then, please, Shomek, and we follow through the entry in June. So if we could just go to that bit below, thank you. So AIDS on whether it's the 6th or the 10th of March 83, and then we can see a reference to your temperature. I think it says no rise in temperature for over a week or more than a week in the past. No, and then it might be throat pains or difficulty in swallowing for more than a week in the past. No shortness of breath for more than a week in the past. No diarrhoea possibly for more than a week in the past. No cough for more than a week in the past. No palpable superficial lymph nodes. No weight loss. Now that appears to be some form of investigation of your physical health to consider whether you are showing any signs of AIDS. Was anything said to you at the time to inform you that examination was being undertaken?
Well, obviously, I would have been asked those questions in order for them to get answers. But why they were asking those questions, I just assumed it was just a normal medical thing. I didn't know that they were looking for anything in particular, and certainly not AIDS.
And if we look at TREL 40267_005, we've got here what seems to be, again, a fairly standard form that appears from time to time in your records. This has got an entry on the left-hand side for what looks like the 9th of Feb 83, and there's reference there to lymphocytes and then T cells. Were you ever told anything about monitoring of T cells or anything of that kind?
No.
Can we then please look at WITN 1541005, please, Shomek? And if we can go to page 3, It's a letter dated the 30th of June 1983, so it's the day after the entry in those records that we looked at. It's addressed to Dr. Crawford in the haematology department at the Hammersmith, and then it's said to enclose copies of bleeding episodes and transfusions, orthopaedic chart and laboratory results, and refers to a course of prophylaxis. And then under the heading AIDS-related investigations, clinically he exhibits none of the stigmata of AIDS. Examination of his superficial lymph nodes on the 10th of March 83, that suggests you're right in reading the handwriting, sir, revealed no palpable lymph nodes. For your information, we've undertaken the enclosed AIDS-related tests. We're repeating these tests before the end of term and we'll let you have a copy when they are available. Were you aware, or were your parents made aware to your knowledge, that Treloar's was undertaking what it described as AIDS-related investigations and tests?
No, because obviously we didn't even know what AIDS was at that time. So, no, of course not.
And is this right? There's no equivalent of this letter addressed to the Hammersmith being sent to your parents?
No.
Your parents just get the end-of-term medical report that we looked at?
Yep, that's as far as I know.
Can we then please go to TREL 40267_089? Now, this is a letter from 1985, 19th of March 1985. It's now being addressed not to the Hammersmith but to the Isle of Wight County Hospital, and because that's now your local centre, is that right?
Yeah, it wasn't a haemophilia centre, but I saw a doctor there. I believe they got the product from Southampton, but yeah, that was the doctor who I generally saw when I was at home.
And we can see it says, "Dear Doctor," refers to you, and then it says, "For your information, I enclose copies of bleeding episodes, transfusions, laboratory results." And then this: he was tested for anti-HTLV3 for the first time on the 12th of January 1984 and was found to be positive. Now, we'll come back in a moment to the significance or otherwise of the date of the 12th of January 1984. But as at this point in time, March 85, were you aware that you were being tested for HTLV3, HIV?
No.
So you were tested without your knowledge and consent?
Yeah.
Your mum, by this time, I think, had died?
She died in July 85.
Were either of your parents, as far as you're aware, told that you'd been tested for HIV?
No.
And we'll come on to how you learnt about your test in a few moments, but were you told at this time, March 1985, that you tested positive for HTLV3?
No.
Now, you know the significance of the words "for the first time on the 12th of January 1984, because you've been following the evidence, I know, and you understand, I think, as we do, that HTLV3 testing was not available at that time. We might be able to cast some light on it if we look at TREL 40267_090, please. This is a letter of the previous year, 11th of July 1984, from Dr. Wassef at Treloar's. It's not clear which doctor it's being addressed to, but it says, "For your information, I enclose copies of," and we see the reference to bleeding episodes, transfusions, etc. And then this: he remains hepatitis B antigen negative. And then there's a reference to the anti-HBC was weekly positive, and anti-HBS was positive on specimen taken on the 12th of January 1984. So that would suggest that a sample of your blood was taken on the 12th of January, although we can't find anything particular in the records that correlates with that.
Yeah.
And was then stored and tested for HTLV3 at some point later, second half of 84, or in any view by March 85.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
Were you aware that your samples were being stored for testing?
No.
And was anything ever said to you about hepatitis B at this time?
All I knew was that I was kind of fairly unique among the haemophiliacs, that I'd never come into contact with hepatitis B. I know they were talking about doing a vaccination against hepatitis B because I hadn't come into contact with it before.
But any hepatitis B testing was not reported to you?
No, I didn't know that obviously they were testing for it.
Are you going to go through some of the records with this in mind? What I have in mind, I just happened to notice as you went through, it's 267 0, so many zeros, 23, and then underscore 002. 267 underscore 023 002.
So be page 2, show me. So I think it'll be TREL 40267
That's
underscore
it.
023, and then the second page.
If one looks at the biochemistry, there, SGOT persistently raised. Then if we go to page 267 underscore 028 at page 4, ten days later, I think, biochemistry, moderate to marked, is it? Increase in SGOT. So it looks as though the records there are of abnormal SGOT readings. Do you have any clue yourself what SGOT stands for?
No idea.
So it follows that no one ever told you?
No.
And we'll come back to this issue when I ask you about how you found out about hepatitis C. But were raised liver function tests or concerns about your liver function ever discussed with you during your time at Treloar's?
No, not at all.
And then if we go to WITN 1541005, please. And if we go to page 12, if we look at the top of this, we can see it's an AIDS surveillance and HIV death clinical report form. This is something being reported by the hospital, St Mary's Hospital, Portsmouth, in 1994. But if we go to the very bottom of the page, and we zoom in on what's said at the bottom, date of first positive test, so it's the bottom right-hand corner. There's reference there to date of first positive test, 6th of September 83, last negative 7th of June 83, which doesn't appear to match up with what else we've seen in your records. Do you have any understanding of what those are referring to?
Well, the only thing they do match is the record from the National Haemophilia Database, but apart from that, no.
And they don't match anything in your Treloar's records?
Well, no, because they're talking about, we had January 84 mentioned. No, obviously it doesn't fall within that range.
Now, what's your recollection of how you learnt that you had been infected with HIV at Treloar's?
Well, contrary to a lot of the haemophiliacs at Treloar's, I believe I wasn't told until 1986. And the reason why I say this is that I was told while I was at Sixth Form College, because I remember there's with Treloar's, their holidays, their Easter holidays and Christmas holidays were 3 weeks in duration, whereas the Autumn College holidays, where I was attending at the time, were only 2 weeks. So there was 1 week where it was just a few of us actually at the school. And so my recollection, it was in that Easter holiday of 1986, and it was me, and it happened to be the previous witness that gave evidence. We weren't together. I believe that we were seen separately. I think I went first. and I believe Dr. Arenstan was there, and almost certainly Dr. Wassif. I believe there was a member of the nursing staff as well. And it was then that I was told that I was HTLV-3 positive.
And can you recall what, if anything, they told you about the significance of that diagnosis?
Well, I knew that, they told me that it meant that my life would be limited. They said they didn't know how long I would have left. It could be anything from a couple of years. They said that you could even survive up to 10 years, but the outlook was bleak, basically. That was my understanding of it.
And were you given any practical advice or assistance that you can recall?
Not that I can recall, no. I can't remember much after that. It was a bit of a shock, obviously.
And then your recollection is that that the other boy being told on the same occasion was, in fact, by coincidence, the witness who gave evidence before the break.
Yeah.
And you were the two being informed on that date, is your recollection?
Yeah.
Were you aware at that point in time that you'd been tested for HTLV-3?
No.
So were you aware of why you were being called in to see Dr. Arenstam and the others?
No, it was something out of the blue, because during the holiday time you don't expect to. There was very little contact because obviously the rest of the haemophiliacs would have gone home for the Easter holiday. So there was very few staff there during that period. So it was a complete surprise to find that they wanted to see us in that period.
Your mum had died by then, the previous year. You can't, I think, recall whether you told your dad or whether Treloar's told your dad.
No, I think it was me. I don't think Treloar's communicated it to him.
What was your response, your reaction to this news?
Well, after getting over the initial shock, I think I kind of tried to put it to the back of my mind. To be honest, I didn't really want to think about it. I thought, well, I just need to kind of get on with life the best I can with what time I've got. And that was my philosophy.
Were you given any form of support or access to a counsellor at Treloar's or anything like that?
No.
And can you recall whether there was any different arrangements made for your care at Treloar's of your accommodation?
Not that I can think of. I mean, by this time it was a separate house just for sixth formers. I think I had my own room anyway. I'm not aware of anything particular in terms of things like the sharing of cutlery and things like that. I don't remember anything like that being prevalent.
Now, it was a number of years later that you found out that you had also been infected with hepatitis C. Is that right?
Yeah.
If we go to WITN 1541006, we go to the second page to start with. Now, this is a form, and we can see it's relating to your time at Treloar's. It's Basingstoke and North Hampshire Haematology Service. Dr. Arenstam is identified as the consultant. The ward is LMTC, Lord Mayor Treloar College. And we can see that the test is being requested by Dr. Wasev, and it's the 9th of March 1982. And what there is a big stamp saying hepatitis risk. Were you ever told that you were regarded or you were regarded in any sense at all as a hepatitis risk?
No.
And was the phrase, I've asked you about hepatitis B, was non-A, non-B hepatitis something that was ever discussed with you at Treloar's?
I'd heard of it, but I wasn't aware of really what it was or what its effects were, how it could affect you. I just heard the term.
And then if we go to the next page, this brings us forward now to 1997, and we can see here a test for hepatitis C, it's a positive test for hepatitis C, January 1997. As far as you're aware, is this the first time you were tested for hepatitis C?
As far as I know, yeah. And I mean, on this particular occasion, I think I was told that they were going to test me for hepatitis C, but that was the first time I knew they were going to do that. Whether I've been tested in the past, I have no idea.
And you've described in your statement someone making a cursory comment, you have hepatitis C or something along those lines. Was that on this occasion?
It would have been the review, presumably following this, the test. So yeah, I believe it was probably on that next visit to the hospital by, I think it was Dr. Green, the consultant at the time.
And that's in Portsmouth.
Yes.
And were you ever given? Sorry, not ever. Were you at that point in time, whatever the precise date, but when you were told you had hepatitis C and what you've described in your statement as being by way of a cursory comment, were you given at that stage any advice or information about hepatitis C?
No.
And was there any a referral of you at that stage to a liver specialist or anything along those lines?
No.
Now, you've told us in your statement, we can take that down, thank you. You've told us in your statement that you were then tested again in 2002.
Yeah.
At a GUM department or GUM clinic in Portsmouth. And that's the point in time at which you were first referred to a liver unit, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And you were referred to the Royal South Hampshire Hospital in Southampton. You were seen by Dr. Rosenberg for investigation of your liver. And what were you told at that point?
I was told that the liver was very badly damaged, and they felt that it was so badly damaged that they wouldn't be able to offer me any treatment to eradicate it.
We'll come on to subsequent issues in relation to your liver in a moment, but if we just go back then to the second half of the 80s and the early 90s, in the years following you being told that you were HIV positive, how was your physical health?
Up to when, sorry?
In the second half of the 80s and the very early 90s.
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, I had the problems with my joints, both ankles and my elbow, but other than those target joints, I was pretty healthy as far as I knew. I didn't notice any issues that you would associate with HIV or hepatitis C at that stage.
You began to receive AZT in 1993.
Yeah.
What was the effect of that?
I'm just trying to think. I don't think it affected me that much because I think I was on a very low dose. I don't recall. I mean, I think there was possibly bouts of diarrhea and things like that, but because the dosage was quite low, I don't think it was affecting me that much.
I think it's right. Your health then began to deteriorate quite markedly in the course of the 1990s.
Yeah.
So you were diagnosed with PCP pneumonia in the autumn of 1994.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were 25 at the time, and you started to have lots of treatment in hospital.
Yeah, I mean, when I had the PCP, I was in for several weeks. It was kind of very isolated because it was on the east wing at St Mary's Hospital in Portsmouth, and it was just it seemed like just a big hut, for want of a better term. And I might have been the only person there, I was kind of out of it quite a bit at the time. But yeah, it was a nasty period, and I wasn't sure if I was going to survive it or not.
And although you were able to return, you recovered from the pneumonia, you were able to return to work for a period of time. You said in your statement that it took a long time to recover your lung capacity, and you've had some difficulty breathing ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I had to be on a nebulizer for some time, after being discharged from hospital, and yeah, I was short of breath for quite some time. Yeah.
Let me just look at one further document, WITN 1541010, please. And we go to the second page. This is a report being made in October 1994 to UKHCDO. It's headed UK Haemophilia Centre Director's Survey of Patients' HIV Infection. And we can see that your condition is classified as AIDS. There's then details of what you've been prescribed. We go further down the page. There's both by way of antivirals and prophylactic treatment. There's then details given of your CD4 count. Were you aware that that information, or indeed any such information about you, was being provided to UKHCDO?
No.
Your consent was not sought for the
No.
provision of that. Now, you'd been working for P&O, and you moved to Dover in 2003.
Yeah,
And you came under the care of Dr. Winter
that's right.
at the Canterbury Haemophilia Centre. And he became concerned about your liver.
Yeah.
And what steps did he take?
He did a referral to King's College Hospital in London, and I was duly sent to have blood tests done there.
And you were called back pretty quickly after the blood test results came in.
Yeah, I hadn't even got home, and I had a call from, I think it was a Dr. Ritza or something along those lines, and he said, we've got abnormalities in your blood test results, and we need you to come back as soon as possible for more tests.
And you were ultimately told that you were going to need a liver transplant.
Yeah.
You went on the liver transplant waiting list,
Mm-hmm.
and you got the call then in 2007, July 2007.
Yeah, that's right.
You had the liver transplant.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you have to be in hospital for? Can you recall?
I was in hospital 3 to 4 weeks, I think. I had trouble trying to stabilise the anti-rejection levels, because once you've had a liver transplant, you have to have an anti-rejection drug. In my case, it's called Prograf, and the dosaging on most people is generally one tablet twice a day. But because I was taking HIV medications as well, they interacted with it. So they had to try and they couldn't work out why the Prograf level was going through the roof. And as I say, when they discovered these interactions, they had to try and stabilise that. So it turns out that instead of having it once or twice a day, I had to finish up having it at that stage once every 7 days, because the HIV was the HIV meds was elevating the Prograf level so much, so it took them a while to get that right.
You've talked about what your word in your statement, Lee, was a bonus of the liver transplant. What was that?
Well, yeah, I suppose the only positive thing I think that has come out of it is it actually cured the haemophilia, because the liver produces the missing factor 8 that's missing from most haemophilias, or factor 9. So yeah, it was just, suddenly I had 60% factor levels all the time, and so it was quite a shock to suddenly realise that you don't need to take these factor 8 injections anymore that you've been taking all your life.
You've then had, since then, a number of different health problems.
Yeah.
You suffered from a form of cancer in October 1998.
Yeah.
Do you know whether that was associated at all with the HIV or hepatitis C?
I'm not sure, but it's possible that the speed that it developed may have been associated with it, from what I found out since.
And then in 2013, you were admitted to hospital in Kent, and you were diagnosed with a very aggressive form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Burkitt's lymphoma.
That's right, yeah.
And you, I think, have researched that and discovered that those who've either had an organ transplant, which you needed because of your hepatitis C
Yeah.
infection, or those who've had HIV,
Yeah.
have a much higher risk of developing Burkitt's lymphoma. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah.
And you've had to have significant treatment.
Yeah, I had to have a very aggressive chemotherapy regime. It goes over a number of cycles, and you have to stay in hospital throughout the duration of this chemotherapy because it is daily. Literally, they're giving you all sorts of different fairly toxic drugs, and it knocks you for six. I mean, it's I can't describe how it makes you feel, but you basically lose. For example, I had really bad mouth ulcers. Some of the drugs gave me hallucinations. I even had a fit while I was actually in hospital during that period. It was really a horrible time, and your immune levels basically go to zero. You just don't have any resistance to infection at all. So I had to be isolated for, well, it was up to 3 months before I was even allowed to go out for a couple of days, just because of because of how low my immune system had obviously got as a result of all these cancer drugs that I needed to beat the cancer.
And you described in your statement being hospitalised for a number of months.
Yeah.
You had to have regular platelet and blood transfusions.
Yeah, I mean that went on even after I was discharged from hospital up to a year and a half later, because the various drugs they'd given me had basically knocked everything for six. Platelet levels were extremely low. I think they were around about 15 or something like that, and my HB level was regularly below 80. So it was a regular thing. I had to go up to hospital 2 or 3 times a week to be tested, and then as a result, I had to wait for the results of that test, and then that would determine whether I had to have either a platelet transfusion or a blood transfusion.
And what was the impact of all the treatment that you had to have on you physically and mentally?
It was very draining. As I say, when I was in hospital, I couldn't even remember things like my date of birth or what day it was and things like that. But it very slowly came back after I came home. But it took a long time to kind of become a bit more normal, for want of a better term.
Now you still had at this point in time hepatitis C.
Yeah.
But you, I think, were treated with Harvoni and ribavirin in 2015.
Yeah, what happened was that they were picking up some more anomalies on my liver tests. They believe it was as a result of having the various cancer drugs that was causing it. So what they wanted to do is they wanted me to have this newer treatment as soon as possible. They didn't want me to. They certainly didn't want me to. They knew that the liver would be reinfected after I'd had the transplant, but they wanted to hold off as long as possible for newer drugs to come along that were far less aggressive and wouldn't affect in the same way. So, and at that particular point in time, at the beginning of 2015, of course, that's when the newer drugs came out, and they felt that was the right time to then try and knock the hepatitis C out, so that I wouldn't have that to contend with on top of everything else that was going on at the time.
And the virus cleared, the hepatitis C virus cleared as a result of that treatment.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
But because of the long-term consequences for your liver, the transplanted liver, you still have to undergo regular monitoring.
Yeah.
And then in early 2017, you noticed a lump on your lip.
That's right. Yeah.
What was that?
It turns out it was actually a form of skin cancer. It was just like a pimple to start with. Sort of like I noticed that sort of like at the beginning of January. It started to get bigger. So by the beginning of March, I went to see my GP, and he thought it might be cancerous, so they then referred me on to the hospital. They had a look at it and said they thought it was, but they weren't sure. But then they decided they were going to cut it out. But then they said, oh, it might be too much of there might be too much of an infection risk. So there was a lot of room in the iron about when they were actually going to do this procedure to actually remove it. So by the time they did remove it, it was some 6 months after I noticed it, and probably at least 3 months after I initially went to my GP before they actually decided where they were actually going to do it.
And again, your understanding is that that particular form of carcinoma is more prevalent in patients who've had HIV or organ transplants.
Yeah.
And what, broadly speaking, is your current physical state of health, Lee?
The latest problem I get now is that as a result of having the liver transplant, I had a incisional hernia, and up to about 2 or so years ago, I didn't have any problems with it at all. But now in the last year or so, it started to give me a lot more problems. So I've had a total of 6 episodes in hospital over the past 15 months, I'd say, where I've had to go into hospital because I've got severe pains across my stomach and I couldn't eat anything and I was throwing up. And what it turns out is that the hernia is obstructing the bowel. So what occasionally happens is that the bowel gets completely obstructed, and then they have to do things like put an NG tube through my nose to drain my stomach and give me fluids, and up to now, touch wood, it's kind of cured each time, but I'm still waiting at the moment for actually having the hernia repair because of COVID. That obviously hasn't gone ahead, but I'm hopeful in the next few weeks they'll actually be able to do it, because I finally had the pre-assessment last week, so I'm hoping that'll be done fairly soon.
Can I ask you then about the broader impacts on your life of being infected with HIV and hepatitis C and all the health consequences that you described that ensued? First of all, in relation to your education, what was the impact of the diagnosis on you in terms of your approach to education?
Well, yeah, my education was fine obviously up to the diagnosis of HIV. I think the diagnosis of HIV affected my performance certainly when it came to my A-levels. I didn't do very well at all at my A-levels. I was fortunate I'd done just enough to do a higher national diploma, and then after that I was able to complete a degree. But that's as far as I went as far as education was concerned.
And you said in your statement that when you were doing your degree, you tended to keep yourself to yourself. You had 1 or 2 close friends, but you didn't want to have to tell people about your HIV.
That's true, yeah. I mean, with regards, because of the stigma of HIV, I didn't tell anyone, to be honest. I didn't want to tell anyone because I was for fear of rejection. So I just kept myself to myself. I mean, part of it I think was down to Treloar's being like an institutional type place, where you only sort of like had a very small circle of friends. To suddenly go to somewhere like university, where it's far bigger, I struggled to cope with that. I had my own room in halls of residence, and to be honest, I had 1 or 2 friends, on the course that I was doing. But apart from that, I kept myself to myself. I stayed in the room most of the time. I very occasionally went out on student nights out, but it wasn't very often.
You got your degree, and you got a work placement at P&O Ferries, and you started, I think, full-time employment there in 1993.
Yeah.
I get the sense from your statement, Lee, that you very much enjoyed working and enjoyed working there.
Yeah.
But the various health difficulties that you've described impacted upon your employment. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was okay initially until it got to sort of like the early 2000s, when I think obviously the effects of the hepatitis C was kind of coming up, and and I found that I wasn't able to. I really was struggling to sleep. My sleep pattern was severely disrupted, so I was finding that I was staying awake all night and then sleeping during the morning. So at that stage, work was quite accommodating, that they would change my hours so that I'd kind of start at midday and then finish about 8-9 o'clock at night, because then I felt I was kind of at my best, and so yeah, they made allowances for that.
And then there was a point in time with your work where you had to effectively, because of the health difficulties, make a sideways move rather than get promotion.
Yeah, because they knew the liver transplant was coming up and I was going to be out of the business for 3 months at least. They felt that they couldn't afford me to have no leader of their team for that length of time, so they did a sideways move for me to just work on individual projects, should I say, and they got another person who was head of another section to cover my section as well.
And ultimately, you were made redundant in I think 2008.
Yeah.
And you believe that redundancy, you being the person selected for redundancy, was ultimately because of the health issues which had resulted in you not being able to progress in the way that you would otherwise have anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, I came back to work, but I was still getting very tired. I was falling asleep at my desk a lot. I just wasn't, and my heart really wasn't in it anymore, if I was honest. I was just too tired and so on. Even after having the transplant, it was just very tiring, and I just felt that, it was a struggle. But then I got the news that because I'd recently only bought a house, sort of like a few months before, I was told that I was at risk of redundancy, and and it was to be basically they were going to merge 2 roles into one, and it was going to be me and this other person who'd been covering for my section. It was just going to be a straight contest between the two of us, and I think it was inevitable, really, that I probably wasn't up to it at that time, and as a result, that's why I think I was made redundant.
In terms of personal relationships, you've described in your statement the difficulties in relation to that, because you were determined if you met someone and had a relationship with them, you would tell them about your condition.
Yeah.
But that made you hold back, and when you did tell someone, sometimes there was sympathy, sometimes there was shock.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't go ahead and meet somebody without telling them beforehand, because obviously, the nature of dating, in this day and age is more often through messaging apps and dating sites and things like that. And yeah, I mean, I didn't want to put myself in the position where I had to be sure that the relationship was going somewhere. But on the other hand, I didn't want to tell him in case I got an immediate rejection after it. So do you tell him early? It's like what you said earlier. Do you tell him early on, or do you wait and then say, well, why didn't you tell me before? It's that dilemma.
And you did meet someone, Tracy.
Yeah.
And you got married in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's when everything went wrong in terms of your employment.
Yeah.
You lost the house.
Yeah, because once I'd lost my job, I couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, and the debts built up, and eventually the house got repossessed because I couldn't find any other work, obviously because of my illnesses. And
eventually the marriage broke down.
It did, yeah.
And although you're still, I think, on good terms.
Oh yeah, we're still really good friends, but it's.
You would attribute that in large measure to everything else that was happening because of your health, the financial difficulties.
Yeah, there was a lot going on anyway, but the health issues on top were, I think, just the tip over the edge, if you like.
I'll just ask you, then, your experience of the trusts and schemes, the Macfarlane Trust in particular. You've talked in your statement about when you were experiencing particular financial difficulties, you tried to I'll ask the McFarlane Trust for assistance with mortgage or with debt repayments. What happened?
Well, they said they couldn't help me, but they actually sent, I think it was somebody from the Terence Higgins Trust, somebody to talk about debt management, but they came to visit me, but to be honest, they weren't any help at all. They talked about it, but they couldn't help me financially in any way. They could only give me debt advice, but I felt I could get that anyway, so I didn't feel that was much help.
And you've said in your statement, my experience with the McFarlane Trust was that they would not consider anything until every possible avenue was explored with other organisations first. The whole process was just so degrading.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they insisted on, various quotes for anything that you want. I think the only thing I did get out of them, from recollection, is I think I had a part payment towards a Motability car, the advance payment on my car. I think that was the only thing I got out of them. But other than that, it was just going through the process of having to divulge all your income and expenditure, and the fact that you had to divulge the income of other people as well that was in your household. I was very unwilling to do that, and I felt it was wrong. They were going to take into account the expenditure of it. I had a lodger with me at the time, and and she wasn't prepared to obviously give out her financial information. I felt it was wrong that they should insist that because somebody was living under the same roof as you, their income should be taken into account as well as yours.
And in terms of the Skipton Fund payments, although you received the lump sum payments, the timing of the Stage 2 payment came too late to save your house from being
It was literally a month. I literally got the payment a month after the house was actually repossessed.
You said this in your statement. I just want to read a paragraph from your statement, Lee. As a result of being infected with contaminated blood products, I have lost my job, my home, my wife, my ability to have children, the possibility of a decent pension, life insurance, my future earnings potential, had numerous serious health issues, and who knows what other health condition could yet materialise. Ironically, the only thing I have gained is the cure for haemophilia, the very condition whose treatment caused all the problems in the first place. Having said all that, at least I'm still here against all the odds, trying to live my life in the best way I can.
That's fair.
Lee, those are the questions I have for you, but I'm just going to first of all ask Mr. Snowden, who represents you, if he's got anything further he would like me to ask. No. So, Brian, do you have questions for Lee?
Yes, just a couple of questions. The first is that when you went to self-treat at Treloar's, you described a chart.
Yeah.
And that told you how many units you would get for a certain percentage of factor VIII in your bloodstream.
That's right.
Was this one chart for whatever concentrate you had, or were there different charts for different brands?
No, there was one chart I remember distinctly. It depended on, I think it was, I can't remember if it was based on body mass or something like, or something to do with surface area of your body. I distinctly remember there was one chart for somebody who's, let's say, smaller, and then another chart for somebody who was larger, shall we say. But that was it. There was no differentiation between different products or anything. It was all the same chart.
So high potency would have exactly the same as anything else, would it?
I don't know, because I'd never had high potency, but
Very well.
But I don't know how that was worked out.
The other question is very different. It's really was as counsel was summarising in your own words everything that had happened to you. I'd been reflecting that you've sat there in your matter-of-fact way, described a whole series of events happening to you, all because, not as you put it, there are health issues on top. I think they were underneath, weren't they? Everything that happened to you?
Yeah.
How have you managed it?
People often ask me that. I don't know. I've tended to always have I try to have a positive outlook on life, and you know, it just it's just another thing to battle with. But I try not to let it get me down. You know, I try to put the problems at the back of my mind and try and see something positive out of it. You know, and that's the way I've always lived, and I think maybe that's part of the reason why I'm still here, because I haven't allowed it to get me down. I haven't, I haven't really suffered from depression or anything like that. I just battle on, as it were, and say, oh, it's just another thing. There's, next.
And for someone who, when they were at university, kept themselves to themselves because of the fear of disclosing that you were HIV positive, who'd seen relationships founder for that reason, and when you came to the McFarlane Trust, described yourself as feeling it demeaning, degrading, that you had to divulge all that information.
Yeah.
Why are you here, sitting in the chair there, telling us all about what has happened to you?
I just now feel that the story has to be told, because we've all of us, both the haemophiliacs at Treloar's and obviously the wider infected blood community. It's I felt that I had to put it out there along with others, because I feel it's important that people know how badly that we've all been affected by this having the infected blood. It's you just needed to you need to hear, as you've said yourself, you want to hear as many different stories as possible, and I felt that mine was something just a bit different from others.
Indeed. Thank you.
Lee, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to read something, if I may. Right. Firstly, I'd like to pay tribute to all the haemophiliacs of Treloar's. Many would say that we put the life into Treloar's. Some would push the boundaries while we were there, but on the whole, I think we were a close-knit bunch, and many close friendships were formed between us. I personally enjoyed my time at the school and kept in touch with some of the staff after leaving. It was through them that I started to learn that one after another, the haemophiliacs were dying of AIDS. I had a close call too, but somehow managed to survive. Out of the few of us that are left, struggling on, some understandably just want to get on with their lives. The rest demand the truth for all those that they made a promise to get answers for. We have heard clinicians from many haemophilia centres give evidence. Unfortunately, most of the key doctors at Treloar's are no longer alive, so I appreciate that the job of the inquiry is made more difficult by having to piece together many incomplete records and to rely on the reflections of those of us who were there at the time. As well as the families of those haemophiliacs that have sadly passed, such as parents that should never have had to bury their sons, I also want to spare a thought for the students at Treloar's that were not haemophiliacs, who had formed close friendships and relationships with the haemophiliacs during this time, and also the care staff and teachers who had little or no knowledge of what was going on at the medical centre, but were left to pick up the pieces. With the exception of one or two staff members, I lost touch with most of those I went to school with after I left in 1987. It was only through reading a local newspaper article in 2015 featuring the late Steve Diamond and his wife Sue that I became aware of tainted blood. And through joining them, I was reacquainted with several former school friends and have also made lifelong friends with many others in the group. This meant I no longer felt isolated, and we could talk about our experiences openly with people who understand. Love you guys, and Steve, you really were a diamond and very much missed. I also want to pay tribute to those who have campaigned tirelessly for many years, including those who have sadly passed and those that gave evidence a few weeks ago. It is in part down to their sheer doggedness and determination that we now have this inquiry, so thank you. I hope that the inquiry can bring a closure to all those who continue to suffer, and although it cannot bring loved ones back or repair the damage done, I hope that at least it may lead to some kind of conversation to everyone infected or affected, including bereaved parents and children who currently get nothing. I thank Sir Brian, the inquiry team, and my legal representatives for all the work so far, and wish the inquiry well.
It doesn't surprise me at all that you've had the prolonged applause which you have, because it's obvious from your last remarks, as it has been throughout, that you've really sat there, a fairly private person in many ways, saying what you have about yourself as a matter of fact, because of you value other people. You haven't really done it for yourself. I think you've done it for others. And that, I think, is why you've had the recognition from everyone here. And I just want to add my thanks to you for, as you say, giving us another different story. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's the last of the oral evidence for today. This afternoon I will resume the examination of the documents about Treloar's that I began on Monday morning.
Yes, well, we'll start that at 2:30. So 2:30.